Hi everyone, I'm Ted Yacucci. Thank you so much for tuning into the channel today. In 2023, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, finally came clean about their role in the inception and the carrying out of the plot to get rid of Mossadegh, the president of Iran, and replace him with the Shah of Iran. After 70 years, the CIA finally came clean in their role in the Iranian Revolution, the Iranian coup. Well, that's a long time. Are we close now to getting finally the truth about the CIA's role in the John F. Kennedy assassination? A few days ago, in front of a congressional committee, the participants were asked directly, right at the end of the hearing, who they thought was responsible for the murder of President Kennedy. And the consensus answer right away was the CIA. So, are we getting there? Will it finally be revealed that the Central Intelligence Agency had not just a minor role or an adjunct role, but a major role, the major role in the assassination of President Kennedy? In effect, a coup d'etat in America. Yes, I think we are there. I think we're finally there. About a year ago, I did a video in which I claimed that I thought the CIA was close to kind of coming clean on the issue, although they would try to compartmentalize it by saying it was just a few bad apples. And I think that's probably the route they're going to take. But as soon as the CIA really admits complicity in the murder, all heck is going to break loose. How do we know it was the CIA? How do we really know it was the CIA? Why am I so sure it was the Central Intelligence Agency? I've reported on the CIA in great detail in other videos, but let's look quickly at the agency under Allen Dulles. The CIA was created in 1947, essentially with no congressional oversight, and began covert and illegal activities almost immediately. In 1953, Allen Dulles became the first civilian CIA director and installed wealthy industrialist friends at the highest level. Soon, industrial profit and greed became the agency's primary focus. As we discussed, the Iran coup took place in 1953. The very next year, the CIA overthrew President Jacobo Arbenz Guzman in Guatemala when he tried to redistribute land to poor peasants. The Dulles brothers led the opposition, ensuring the continuance of a system in which their client, the United Fruit Company, and the top 2% of wealthy landowners in the country continued to control 74% of all arable land in Guatemala, as well as control almost every government and social system. Also in 1953, Project MK-Ultra was begun as a CIA program into mind control to alter subject mental states and brain functions using uninformed American and Canadian subjects. LSD was often used. In one experiment, LSD was given to subjects for 77 consecutive days. Later, CIA Director Richard Helms illegally destroyed thousands of MK-Ultra documents when ordered to testify about the program before Congress. In 1960, Operation 40 was created by Dulles and his cronies to have the Mafia assassinate Fidel Castro of Cuba. That's right, they hired the Mafia to assassinate President Fidel Castro of Cuba. How out of control was this organization? In 1961, the CIA killed Patrice Lumumba, the democratically elected president of Congo, against Kennedy's orders. Lumumba, again, was trying to redistribute the country's wealth and mineral ownership to poor people, rather than the U.S. and Belgium governments. Soon after, Secretary General of the United Nations, Dag Hammarskjöld, was killed in a plane crash everyone associates with the CIA when he was in Africa trying to investigate the Lumumba murder. And finally, Dulles was dismissed along with the top echelon of the CIA when President John Kennedy found out that they were lying to him during the planning of the Bay of Pigs operation in Cuba. Two other operations are critical and need to be on this list, perhaps most critical. Number one is Operation Mockingbird, the project to control media started by Dulles and the CIA in the early 50s. By the time the project ended, over 3,000 salaried employees in both newspapers and television were on the payroll of the CIA. I'll say that again, over 3,000 salaried employees in newspapers and television stations and networks across the United States were on the payroll of the CIA. And then finally, perhaps the most critical operation, I think, took place in Chicago 3 weeks before Dallas. We know that was the failed assassination attempt on Kennedy in Chicago. What I think is most important as it relates to the CIA in that operation is that the Diem brothers in South Vietnam were both were kidnapped and killed on that exact day. So Kennedy and the Diem brothers really were all supposed to be killed on, I believe it was November 2nd, 1963. Henry Cabot Lodge, the ambassador to Vietnam, was recalled immediately by Kennedy. He would have been fired as soon as Kennedy got back from his Texas trip, but Henry Cabot Lodge was definitely working in conjunction with the CIA as part of the plot to kill President Kennedy. Okay, so there's the cold hard fact of who murdered, who killed, who assassinated President John F. Kennedy. It was the CIA under Allen Dulles. They overthrew the presidency of the United States, the same as they overthrew the democratically elected governments under Mossadegh in Iran, under Jacobo Arbenz Guzman in Guatemala, and under Patrice Lumumba in the Congo. More importantly, they are responsible for the hundreds of thousands of deaths in all of the countries in which these overthrows took place. Almost all of these people were peasants and innocent civilians who were caught up in the chaos. If there's a hell, Allen Dulles and his cronies are there. Okay, so now we know the who, the hard, cold who of who assassinated President John Kennedy. It was the CIA. But why? Why did they do it? Why? So Dulles, Bissell Jr., and Cabell, whose brother just happened to be the mayor of Dallas at the time, had been running their own Murder Incorporated for a decade, prioritizing massive wealth and profits for themselves and their corporate benefactors. When Kennedy signed National Security Action Memo 263, pulling 1,000 advisors out of Vietnam by the end of 1963 and virtually all American military by the end of 1965, this was too much for Dulles and the corporate titans who had run American foreign policy for the decade before Kennedy was elected. There were hundreds of millions of dollars in profit to be made by a war in Southeast Asia, and Kennedy was not going to give them that war. It is my sincere belief that President Kennedy was murdered first and foremost not for political motivations or for the exhaustively used excuse of stopping communism. No, the overwhelming motive for assassinating the 35th President of the United States was greed. Simple, unadulterated greed. That's right, greed. Greed for profits and greed for power. You know, in my opinion, this is really the time where all of us need to call our Congress people. We need to put pressure on to continue with the JFK assassination analysis and to be able to come to some conclusions. We live in a time where greed and power are just unparalleled, and we're all getting to the point, I think, where we feel minimal. We feel that we have no recourse against the people who really hold a lot of power and control in our democracy, because it's so revolving around profits and greed. So let's go ahead and see if we can make a difference by getting the JFK assassination case resolved, and maybe that'll make a positive influence in our democracy overall. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.